And thank you so much for watching Morning Live. Now, companies and individuals who don't pay workers according to the National Minimum Wage Act will soon be exposed. The Department of Labour has assigned over 1,300 inspectors to monitor employers who don't comply with the Act and then publish them on the department's website. The legislation, which came into effect early this year, stipulates a minimum rate of 20 Rand per hour or roughly 3,400 Rand per month, depending on the number of hours worked. And to discuss this further from the department, we're joined by Adv Fikiswa Mcanca, who is the Chief Director for Statutory Services, and from the Domestic Workers Empowerment League, we are joined by Professor Thidziambi Phendla, who is the founder and chairperson of the organization. Ladies, thanks for coming through.
Thank you.
So let me start with the department, just in terms of the Act. How familiar would you say South Africans and also employers are with the details thereof?
I would say all employers are aware that there is national minimum wage and they need to comply with the legislation. Because as the department, before the promulgation of the National Minimum Wage Act on the 23rd of November 2018, we made it a point that we go to employers for public hearings. We advocated the law even after we had some sessions in ensuring that employers are aware of the national minimum wage. Just recently, on the 25th or 25th of March, we had a seminar in Cape Town, where all employers in wholesale and retail, more especially the Chinese sector, the Chinese community, were made aware of the legislation to an extent that we made it a point that we translated the legislation into Mandarin in order to ensure that they are familiar with the legislation.
So into Mandarin, any other languages that you took that trouble for, or was there a specific reason for you doing that?
There was a specific reason why we did that, because when our inspectors conduct inspections, we always get a feedback from the inspectors to say these Chinese, they don't understand English. So we decided to be proactive and ensure that we bring the legislation to them in their language that they understand. And even in other South African languages, we translated the legislation into all the nine languages that are there.
So since the legislation has come into effect, how compliant have businesses and individuals been thus far?
We're still struggling, more especially with those sectors that did not have the sectoral determination previously, like your community sector, where you will find that the creches, the NPOs and NGOs, they will plead that they don't have money to pay the employees. And they will also plead that they need to apply for exemption in order to ensure that they pay less than the national minimum wage. But we also have a challenge, more especially with the domestic sector, the agriculture, manufacturing and construction. We are still struggling in those areas.
What exactly are you struggling with?
We are struggling with the payment of the national minimum wage. They're not paying the national minimum wage.
Let's bring this to Professor Phendla, because firstly, if you could just tell us more about your organization and what exactly it is that you do.
We started as an advocacy where we advocate for the basic conditions of employment for all the domestic workers. And then later on we realized that besides the advocacy and informing them of their rights, there is a problem of training. And then we then embrace the training part as well. So we realized that there are so many people who are not necessarily complying, especially with the registration. Many domestic workers in our country are not registered. And you find that statistics will indicate that we've got about 1 million something, but in the real sense of the word, there are about 5 million domestic workers, and they are not registered.
What have you found have been some of the reasons why people do not register domestic workers?
I think it's because of the compliance as well. And some people maybe don't understand that when you have a domestic worker, you are an employer yourself, and they have the rights for basic conditions of employment. They need to work the 40 hours, not more than that. And in this area, with the domestic worker, they exploit them a lot. Most of them work something like 18 hours, because a person will wake up at about 5 o'clock and take care of the kids, and then they will only sleep after Mubango, after 9 o'clock. So, and then when you count all those hours, it's about 18 hours. So they don't register them because they know that they are already exploiting them.
So with regard to the reasons, the drivers behind this exploitation, do domestic workers actually know and understand their rights?
I think both the employer in most cases and the domestic workers, they don't understand their rights. You find that when a person is employing an individual, they feel like they belong to their home. And then a person will be saying, oh, I take care of her as if she's part of my family. And when I work for someone, I'm not their family. I'm there to work. The relationship of a worker and an employer must be there. The boundaries must be there. So you find that both sides don't understand what they need to know about the basic conditions of employment, that they have a right to a leave of about 2 weeks or 14 days. They've got a right to weekend day offs, and they've got a right to work at least 45 hours a week.
So with regard to the sectoral determination that Fikiswa spoke about, just run us through that again for anyone who's watching right now. And as you say, often it is both the domestic workers and the employers who don't understand what needs to happen. So you just have an opportunity now for people who are watching to tell them exactly what the sectoral determination is.
The sectoral determination so far is 15 Rand across the board. In the past, it used to be 13 Rand for rural areas. But then for those who work for at least 45 hours, it's 15 Rand. Except the metropolitan areas where you find that maybe a person is working less than 27 hours or up to 27 hours. Therefore, it's going to be 16 Rand 3 cents per hour.
16 Rand 3 cents per hour.
Mm-hmm.
Now, coming back to the department, Advocate Fikiswa, so you have now got these inspectors, 1,300 we understand, who are going to be dispatched to go and check on compliance. But is that enough? I know you're going to say it's a start, but is that enough?
I would say it's not enough. But I think the approach is to target where it most matters. But my issue with the domestic workers is that, firstly, I wouldn't say that employers don't know what they are required to do in terms of registering their employees. But the challenge is that they will treat it as casual working, and also they will ensure that they take foreign nationals and they will pay them less than the national minimum wage. Now, this also impacts on the issue of unemployment rate in the country. That would say we are sitting at 27 or 28% unemployment because these employers are not registered as employers and they are not registered as employees in the relevant legislation. Now, the challenge is that you are saying we have 1 million employers in terms of a domestic sector, but the real statistics is saying 5,000 or 5 million employers. Now, what are we saying as a country? Now, immediately you take a foreign national and you're not registered. It means you have a worker that is not declared. You have a person that is in the country illegal because of you as an employer of this country. Now, how are we contributing to economic development of the country?
So how are you going to do better in terms of monitoring compliance with these new inspectors? What sort of skills have they been equipped with, and how will they go about their task?
Our inspectors are trained. They are trained to conduct the inspection. And remember, the national minimum wage is not a new thing. It's as simple as the sectoral determination that was not there, but we have now one single sectoral determination. Now, these inspectors know how to conduct inspections. But when it comes to sectors like the domestic, we'll have to work with the organizations like these ones, where we ensure that where you talk about registering or the private employment agencies, we're talking employment agencies that are registered with the Department of Labor, so that we ensure that those employers that are placed through those agencies are registered and those employees are registered.
Professor Phendla, the department is talking about naming and shaming those who contravene the law. Do you believe that is sufficient, or is there something else that you would like to see?
I think the first point is registration, because when a domestic worker, we call them domestic workers for better way of understanding it. When your helper is not registered, it means that person is not necessarily losing from maybe the basic conditions. It's also losing issues like the road accident fund. If, for instance, she gets involved in an accident because she's not registered, she's not going to get the road accident fund, which is already for everyone. So registration is the first point. And then, of course, inspection and compliance and all these other regulations need to follow. And then, of course, with the basic condition, I mean, the minimum wage, 2,400 is not enough. I mean, we don't have special retailers for domestic workers where they will get bread for R2 or where they will get soap for less. So that money on its own is not enough.
And just a final question, when will these inspectors start going out with regard to what we are talking about right now? Or are they already out in the field?
They are already out. I'll just make an example of the blitz inspections that we had in February, where we targeted those sectors that we know that they are problematic. And I'll just make an example of domestic sector, where this thing of registration is really serious because employers that are registered are paying the national minimum wage. From the 150 that we targeted in the 2 weeks of February, only 3 employers were not paying the national minimum wage, meaning that the employers that are not paying are the ones that are not registered. The ones that are registered, they know their obligation that they need to register, they need to pay the national minimum wage. So we need to go back to the basics and work with the organizations so that we know where these employers are. Because it's very difficult to know that there is a domestic worker if the domestic worker is not declared.
Indeed. Ladies, thank you so much. And this, of course, speaks to what the Department of Labour intends to do to try and get people to comply with the conditions of the Act and pay the basic minimum wage to their employees. We're going to leave it there and go to news with Leanne.